Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a pretty high-stakes journey, really, looking back through history, examining something absolutely core to Pakistan's existence, the strategic choices its generals made, specifically about international alliances.
Yeah, and this isn't just dry diplomatic history, is it?
No, not at all. It's more about, well, necessity, adaptability, how a nation survives.
Exactly.
Our mission, then, is to cut through, decades of shifting geopolitics, try and understand the strategy underneath it all.
And we've got a good base for this.
We do. We're drawing on quite a stack of sources, including analysis from the generals of Pakistan by Zahir Ahmad Mir. We're really zoning in on that bit about foreign alliances from CO to CPEC.
Oh, yeah.
Because the question is, how did these military leaders, one after another, use global partnerships, not just for prestige, but as actual tools?
Nice. Tools for strength, tools for ensuring Pakistan stayed relevant, stayed on the map.
Yeah.
And to really get that mindset, we have to start with the core idea the sources push right away. For the Pakistan Army, these alliances, they weren't ever seen as some kind of, optional extra, a diplomatic nicety. They were understood fundamentally as weapons of survival.
Weapons of survival? Wow. Okay. That frames it instantly, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not about finding friends. It's about necessity. Stark necessity.
If alliances are weapons, well, you use them when you need them.
Right. Against specific threats.
And crucially, you might discard them or change them when they stop serving that core strategic purpose.
That explains a lot. It explains the, frankly, dizzying shifts in partners over the years.
Absolutely. From that solid Western alignment back in the Cold War.
SEATO, CENTO?
Yeah, to now. This huge economic and digital pivot towards China, toward the Gulf states.
The partners change, sometimes radically.
Constantly. Driven by world events, by threats, by opportunities. But the mission, that underlying goal.
What was it?
Safeguard Pakistan. Amplify its strength. That's the constant thread. That's what we're going to track.
Okay, let's unpack that foundational idea then. No nation survives alone. You have to think about the context, right? Post-partition, 1947.
Exactly. Pakistan emerges into this incredibly volatile neighborhood.
And bang, straight into the Cold War. A bipolar world.
And they didn't have the deep industrial base, did they? Or the big financial reserves.
Or the advanced military tech they felt they needed to feel secure, especially given the regional dynamics.
So the sources really stress this point. The generals knew right from the start that just relying on internal resources, that wasn't going to cut it for long-term security.
They had to look outwards.
They had to build bridges that essentially guaranteed their national existence. Now, they knew every alliance comes with risks. That's obvious.
Sure, you risk getting dragged into someone else's fight.
Or compromising your sovereignty, maybe becoming economically dependent, all real risks.
But the calculation was?
The calculation, according to these sources, was that those risks, they were way less dangerous than the immediate threat, which was geopolitical isolation, being left alone.
So it wasn't about finding the perfect partner or the ideologically pure one.
No, not at all. It was about finding necessary leverage, whatever worked at the time.
Okay, so what was that constant mission, the strategic mandate guiding these calculations decade after decade? Let's pin down the doctrine.
The doctrine, as laid out in the sources, it's like a threefold mandate applied consistently.
Right.
First, non-negotiable, safeguard Pakistan. National defense is everything. Alliances must provide tangible security guarantees.
Okay, safeguard. What's two?
Second, amplify strength. Alliances have to be transactional. They need to deliver something Pakistan couldn't generate itself. Access to tech, military gear, economic muscle.
Makes sense. Get something concrete out of it. And the third part, you mentioned a long view.
Yeah, the third is prepare for the future. Every decision, every partnership, it had to position Pakistan for what was coming down the road.
Avoid short-term wins that create long-term problems.
Exactly. No short-sighted gains that blow up in your face later. So if you use this framework, safeguard, amplify, prepare, you can track the whole story pretty clearly.
From Ayub Khan's military pacts.
Through Zia leveraging the Afghan crisis, Musharraf's sort of strategic retreat after 9/11.
Right up to Asim Munir now with CPEC and the digital stuff.
The methods change completely, but the mission, safeguard, amplify, prepare, that doesn't waver.
That adaptability, that's really the core of what we're tracking here, isn't it?
It is.
It's like watching a nation constantly recalibrating its foreign policy based on the global weather report.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. From seeking Western protection
to running a massive anti-Soviet proxy war.
to now anchoring itself in these huge economic corridors.
Right.
It's quite a study in strategic flexibility, always under military leadership guiding that ship.
Okay, let's shift gears. Let's go back to that foundational era. Field Marshal Ayub Khan, the 50s, the 60s.
Right. This is the moment of decision.
A very clear choice was made, aligned firmly with the West, specifically the U.S.
Pakistan positioned itself as, well, a vital piece on the Cold War chessboard.
Yeah.
Part of that containment strategy against the Soviets.
And this wasn't just handshakes, it was formalized. Specific military pacts.
Absolutely. Two key ones. These weren't just bilateral agreements. They were big multilateral structures that really defined Pakistan's strategic geography for a while.
We're talking SEATO.
SEATO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization.
Okay, let's just remind ourselves, because these acronyms are central to that early doctrine. What were they actually for?
Well, SEATO, set up in '54, its stated goal was defending Southeast Asia against communist expansion.
And the members.
You had the U.S., UK, France, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Philippines, and Pakistan.
Right, and CENTO.
CENTO followed in '55, originally the Baghdad Pact. It was basically the Middle East version.
Containing the Soviets from moving south.
Exactly. Towards the warm waters, the oil fields. Members there were Turkey, Iran, the UK, and again, Pakistan.
So Pakistan was like the linchpin connecting these two major Western defense efforts.
Pretty much. Hinge, yeah. From the Middle East across to Southeast Asia, strategically very significant location.
So the strategic exchange. The U.S. needed allies near the Soviet Union, listening posts. What did Pakistan get? Tangible stuff. Military capacity.
This is where that Amplify Strength mission really comes into play.
Okay.
Because the exchange wasn't just, nice words. It was a huge injection of actual hardware, technology, training, logistics support.
Through specific programs.
Yeah, the Military Assistance Program, MAP, tied into these pacts. That pipeline delivered crucial military aid, extensive training for Pakistani officers, and access to tech that was, really cutting edge for its time, stuff most developing nations just couldn't get their hands on.
And the sources really highlight specific pieces of kit, game-changing hardware.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't token stuff. This transformed their conventional capabilities.
Yeah.
We're talking specifically about getting F-86 Sabres.
The fighter jets.
Yeah, top-of-the-line swept-wing fighters back then. And Patton tanks. Serious heavy armor.
Those acquisitions sound like they'd make a real difference on the ground.
Strategically transformative.
Yeah.
Gave them a massive technological edge in the region. Defined their military posture for years.
Right, so there's the tangible payoff.
Yeah.
But here's where the sources make a really bold connection. They argue this Western aid, this tech, it directly fueled the 1965 victory against India. That's a huge claim. How do they back that up? How did the alliance give them the teeth for that war, especially when the U.S. was supposed to be neutral in regional fights?
Well, this is where the analysis gets, quite pointed.
Right.
The claim is backed up by looking at how that specific hardware performed. The F-86 Sabres, flown by pilots trained often in the West, they dominated the early air battles. And the Patton tanks, they provided that crucial heavy armor points on the ground.
So the U.S. gear provided a qualitative edge, and maybe quantitative too.
Both. At critical moments in that conflict, it gave them the superiority they needed.
But hang on. Using U.S.-supplied gear against India, wasn't that against the rules? I mean, the understanding was this aid was for fighting communism, right? That sounds incredibly risky.
Oh, it was a massive risk. And the fallout was immediate and severe.
How so?
The U.S. reacted exactly as you'd expect. They slapped an arms embargo on both sides.
Okay.
But because Pakistan had become so reliant on U.S. parts, maintenance, the whole ecosystem, that embargo hit them much harder moving forward, hurt their readiness.
Oh, right.
But, and this is the crucial point the sources make looking back, the alliance still achieved the immediate strategic goal.
Which was?
Getting the necessary weapons when they were needed most to defend the nation in '65. So the lesson is kind of double-edged.
Okay.
The alliance gave them the power to fight and arguably win that round. But it also showed just how dangerous it is to rely totally on a superpower halfway across the world.
Whose priorities can shift on a dime.
Exactly. A very painful but important strategic lesson learned.
Yeah, that volatility of the Western alignment, it certainly became clear. But then the next big global event just completely flips the chessboard again.
1979.
The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. A true geopolitical earthquake, as the sources call it. And this demanded a total strategic pivot. General Zia-ul-Haq was the man in charge for this complex maneuver.
And the shift was, well, unprecedented is probably the right word.
Also,
Pakistan went, almost overnight, from being just a strategically useful ally to being the frontline state of the free world, full stop.
wow, that's a huge elevation in status.
It wasn't about dusty old treaties anymore. SEATO, CENTO, irrelevant now. This was about an active, hot proxy war against a superpower right on their western border.
So Pakistan's geography became its ultimate bargaining chip.
Absolutely. Its physical location became the key strategic asset. And Zia, well, he leveraged that reality ruthlessly and effectively, you have to say.
Being the frontline state, that must have meant a massive change in resources in strategic importance, way beyond what SEATO ever delivered.
Oh, completely different scale. This operational role unlocked this enormous, sustained, and mostly covert flow of resources. The U.S., obviously, but also Saudi Arabia, China, other allies chipped in. We're talking billions in aid and weapons.
Billions.
Directed specifically at supporting the Mujahideen resistance fighting the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And it wasn't just military aid, crucially. It was huge financial backing that also propped up Pakistan's own struggling economy at the time.
And the sources put a lot of emphasis on the role of the ISI, the Inter-Services Intelligence. Became legendary, is the word they use.
Yeah, the ISI became absolutely central, the indispensable operational hub for the whole effort.
How did it function? What was its specific role in this alliance?
Its role was really compartmentalized. Logistics, training the Mujahideen, and, crucially, funneling the aid. They managed the incredibly complex job of distributing weapons.
Including some very specific high-impact ones.
Yes. Things like the Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Getting those into the hands of the right groups. That was pivotal. It helped neutralize the Soviet air superiority, their helicopter gunships, change the battlefield dynamics.
So the ISI basically coordinated these global efforts, turning Pakistan into the gatekeeper for the whole anti-Soviet project in Afghanistan.
That's a good way to put it, the gatekeeper. Without them, the logistics just wouldn't have worked on that scale.
Okay, let's look at the outcome. The sources make some massive claims about the regional and global consequences of this whole partnership.
Well, the consequences were massive, undeniably global and transformative.
How so?
The Afghan war severely drained the Soviet Union. Economically, militarily, politically, it was a huge factor.
Yeah.
Maybe not the only one, but a huge one. In its eventual collapse just over a decade later.
Right. And Afghanistan.
Afghanistan was eventually liberated from Soviet occupation, though obviously what came next was complex.
And Pakistan's position.
Pakistan emerged from that decade of intense cooperation, having successfully managed this huge international effort as a definitive regional power. They had stared down a superpower on their border and effectively won.
And this leads to that really powerful, almost provocative statement the sources make. The lesson drawn is, when Pakistan led, empires crumbled.
Yeah.
We need to unpack that. Are they saying Pakistan alone did it, or that it was the crucial linchpin? How do they justify saying Pakistan's leadership crumbled an empire?
They justify it by arguing that Pakistan's role was essential.
Yeah.
Without Pakistan providing that sanctuary, the training bases, the logistical pipeline, the Mujahideen resistance simply couldn't have been sustained at the level it was. The Soviets might have eventually won or at least achieved a stalemate on their terms.
So Pakistan turned it into an unwinnable quagmire for Moscow.
That's the argument. That Pakistan's willingness and ability to be that frontline state, to channel the global effort, that was the decisive factor. It was a strategic masterstroke in terms of leveraging a crisis. The Amplify Strength mission, taken to its absolute extreme, maximum national influence gained from a geopolitical storm.
But this is a huge but. This strategic victory came at an immense cost, right? The sources must acknowledge the blowback, turning your country into a funnel for a global proxy war that has consequences.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis is clear on this. While the strategic goals, safeguard the nation, help crumble the Soviet empire, were arguably met, the long-term domestic costs were severe, and Pakistan is still dealing with them.
Like what?
The sheer volume of weapons that flowed into the region, the influx of foreign fighters, the strengthening of militant ideologies, all this contributed massively to domestic instability later on, border problems, the rise of non-state actors that would plague not just Pakistan, but the whole region for decades.
So the sources are saying the seeds of the next crisis were sown right there, in the success of the Zia-era alliance.
Pretty much, yes. The triumph of the Afghan Jihad alliance contained the genesis of the instability that Zia's successors, particularly Musharraf, would inherit and have to confront head-on.
And that instability, born from the Afghan Jihad alliance, Well, it came home to roost in the most spectacular, terrible way possible with 9/11.
Yeah, a catastrophic event that forced another immediate, brutal strategic recalculation.
General Pervez Musharraf was in charge then, and the sources called the situation he faced the hardest choice.
It wasn't just hard, it felt existential at the time. You had the U.S. reeling from the attacks, demanding immediate total alignment against global terror.
And specifically targeting groups and elements in Afghanistan.
That Pakistan had, let's be frank, previously tolerated or even actively supported during the anti-Soviet jihad.
So Musharraf faced this stark, zero-sum decision.
Completely. Align 100% with the U.S.-led coalition against terror, or face the consequences, which could have meant catastrophic isolation, sanctions, maybe even military action. The pressure was immense.
That's a moment where national pride, ideology, past relationships, they must have screamed against cooperating.
Of course. Emotionally, ideologically, it must have been incredibly difficult. But the sources are really insistent on interpreting Musharraf's decision through a cold, hard, strategic lens.
How so?
They argue, very explicitly, this wasn't about choosing sides ideologically. It wasn't surrendering. It was pure, unadulterated survival.
Survival first.
The principle was, in moments of extreme, immediate danger, national strategy has to trump everything else. Sentiment, history, ideology, irrelevant. The focus became immediate damage control, preserving core national interest, whatever the cost, in terms of past policy.
Okay, so what did that alignment actually look like? What were the specific things Pakistan had to do? What was the compromise?
Well, the U.S. demands were significant. Musharraf responded quickly. Providing critical intelligence was key.
Yeah.
Logistical support for coalition forces operating in Afghanistan. And perhaps most significantly, granting access to Pakistani airspace and allowing the use of certain air bases for coalition operations.
That sounds like a huge concession.
It was a painful, high-stakes trade-off. But by giving that operational support, Pakistan bought itself immediate, vital returns. Diplomatic cover, basically. Avoided being labeled as part of the problem.
And what were those core national interests that this alignment managed to protect? What did Pakistan gain by making this incredibly difficult choice?
It shielded the nation from basically three existential threats at that moment.
Okay.
First, it secured immediate and ongoing vital aid. Billions of dollars flowed again, which was crucial for stabilizing the economy and funding the internal counterterrorism efforts that Pakistan itself now had to undertake.
Right.
Second, and maybe the biggest fear at the time, by aligning quickly and decisively, they successfully avoided sanctions. If Pakistan had hesitated or resisted, the U.S. almost certainly would have imposed crippling economic sanctions, which could have been devastating.
Okay. Aid secured, sanctions avoided. What was the third crucial thing?
Protecting the crown jewels, the nuclear program.
Ah, yes. The ultimate national security guarantee.
Exactly. By becoming a key ally in the war on terror, Pakistan ensured its nuclear assets stayed out of the immediate crosshairs, prevented them from becoming a direct target of hostile international scrutiny, or worse, intervention.
So, in that context, the sources argue Musharraf's alignment was actually the ultimate example of the Safeguard Pakistan mandate.
That's the interpretation. It wasn't about glorious victories this time. It wasn't about toppling empires. It was about ensuring the state itself survived the immediate shockwave of 9/11.
Preserving its key strategic assets, like the nuclear program and its basic economic stability.
Precisely. So the strategic lesson from the Musharraf era is a very defensive one, perhaps.
How so?
The alliance wasn't about projecting power. It was a strategic shield.
Yeah.
It bought time. It ensured stability in a moment of absolute global chaos.
The key takeaway being?
Strategy in a crisis like that isn't about feeling good or what's popular. It's about making the hard calls that ensure the nation lives to fight another day.
Right.
The alliance was a necessary life raft. It allowed Pakistan to keep its head above water, preserve its core strengths, while navigating this incredibly polarized, hostile New World Order post 9/11.
Which brings us, finally, to the current era. Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir. And here, the alliance strategy seems to have shifted fundamentally again.
A really profound shift, actually.
Away from those traditional military pacts, away from the counterterrorism focus.
And squarely into the economic and technological sphere, what the sources call the digital frontier.
Right. It's like an acknowledgement that in the 21st century,
survival and strength are defined as much by economic resilience and tech relevance as they are by tanks and fighter jets. Maybe more so.
And the primary strategic framework for this modern era, it seems heavily centered on China.
Undeniably, Pakistan has positioned itself as the absolute hub of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC.
Which is itself the flagship project of China's massive global Belt and Road Initiative, BRI.
Exactly. CPEC is the centerpiece of Pakistan's current economic alliance strategy.
CPEC is huge. We hear the numbers, multi-billion-dollar projects. How do the sources describe Pakistan's specific role within this giant initiative?
Well, geographically, Pakistan is China's crucial gateway to the Arabian Sea, connecting western China, Xinjiang, down to the deep-sea port at Gwadar.
Okay.
But the CPEC framework is much more than just a port and a road. It includes massive energy projects, coal, hydropower plants to address Pakistan's energy shortages, extensive upgrades to road and rail networks, new industrial zones.
And the financing, that's always a big question with BRI projects.
The sources definitely detail the financing structure. It brings huge, much-needed investment in infrastructure, absolutely. But they also note it requires very careful management of the associated debt, which underscores that these modern economic alliances, especially involving finance on this scale, they demand a constant balancing act, risk versus reward.
But it clearly fits the Amplify Strength mandate just in the economic realm this time.
Absolutely. It's about leveraging external partnership for massive internal development and connectivity.
But the strategy isn't just China, is it? We're seeing a clear diversification effort, particularly towards the Gulf states. That looks like a pretty sophisticated, multi-pronged approach.
It is. And it's crucial. The sources highlight these vital financial partnerships with key Gulf nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar.
What do they provide?
Much-needed capital injection, investment flows, trade stability. This investment specifically has secured billions flowing into very targeted domestic projects.
Designed to modernize specific sectors.
Exactly. Areas like agriculture, mining, IT, key parts of the economy.
And there's a specific structure managing these investments, right? The SIFC.
Yes, the SIFC, the Special Investment Facilitation Council, that's key. It was set up specifically to be a one-stop shop for foreign investors.
Cutting through red tape.
Precisely. Streamline the bureaucracy, speed up approvals, make sure that capital coming in from allies in the Gulf, and China too, actually gets deployed efficiently into these high-priority projects.
Like the Green Pakistan Initiative.
Yeah, that's a major focus. Using allied investment for environmental projects, agricultural modernization, making these alliances directly relevant to improving lives and building sustainable domestic capacity.
Okay, and here's where the sources flag something really cutting edge. Moving beyond infrastructure and investment into pure innovation. They mentioned Pakistan actively exploring blockchain diplomacy.
Yeah, this is fascinating stuff.
It sounds futuristic.
Yeah.
How does a technology like blockchain actually help anchor trust with global partners? It's not exactly a traditional diplomatic tool.
No, it's definitely next-generation thinking.
Yeah.
The idea behind blockchain diplomacy is leveraging that decentralized, immutable ledger technology for high-stakes international agreements or transactions.
Give me an example. How would it work?
Okay, imagine using blockchain to manage financial transactions for CPEC projects, or maybe for digital trade agreements with, say, the UAE. The key benefit is trust and transparency, baked into the technology itself. Because the ledger is decentralized and cryptographically secured, neither side can unilaterally go back and change the terms of the deal.
So you can't argue about the debt repayment schedule or the customs data for a shipment because it's locked on the blockchain.
Exactly. The technology itself acts as a kind of incorruptible digital notary, an impartial anchor for the agreement.
That could be huge in contexts where there's maybe some underlying friction or suspicion.
Precisely, especially with complex long-term deals involving massive amounts of money or sensitive data. Using blockchain provides a shared, secure, verifiable foundation. It shifts the basis of the alliance partly from just political promises
to something secured by code, by cryptographic certainty.
Yeah. It helps anchor trust with global partners in a very tangible, tech-driven way, securing data exchange, financial flows, making things more predictable.
So the big lesson from this current Munir-era strategy, it seems like a complete redefinition of what constitutes national strength and how you secure it through alliances.
I think that's right. The core lesson seems to be that modern alliances for Pakistan now are less about fighter jets and tanks and much more about data, finance, and innovation.
Securing energy supplies.
Building digital corridors, managing complex financial flows securely.
And trying to lead a next-gen tech like blockchain to ensure you remain relevant, strong, and ultimately secure in the 21st century. It's a whole new battlefield, in a way. #tag outro. Wow. Okay, this has been quite the journey. A really comprehensive look at decades of Pakistan's high-stakes alliance building. The sheer trajectory is kind of astonishing when you lay it out.
It really is.
You start with Ayub Khan, the focus, pure Cold War alignment, getting Western military packs, SEATO, CENTO, why, to get desperately needed military hardware, tanks, jets.
Then the pivot under Zia-ul-Haq. Afghanistan explodes. Pakistan becomes the frontline state, leverages that crisis brilliantly, strategically speaking, gets billions in aid, unprecedented regional clout, helps bring down an empire.
But sows the seeds of future trouble, which leads to Musharraf after 9/11, facing that hardest choice, forced into a defensive alignment with the U.S., all about survival. Avoid sanctions, protect the nuclear program, strategic retreat almost.
And that brings us right up to Munir today, where the entire focus has shifted. It's economic, it's digital, it's CPEC with China, huge investments from the Gulf via the SIFC, and even experimenting with things like blockchain diplomacy.
4 distinct stages, 4 different sets of primary partners, 4 completely different global contexts.
Driven entirely by external necessity and perceived national interest at each stage.
And yet, despite the radical differences in who the partners were, what the alliances look like, the sources keep pulling us back to that single unifying mission, the thread connecting all these eras.
That's the constant. That's the key takeaway. According to this analysis, the generals consistently chose partners, not because they liked them, not for ideology, not for prestige, but purely for survival and to amplify strength.
The mission stayed fixed. The tools, the partners, the external support structures needed to achieve it, those changed dramatically based on the global situation.
That strategic consistency and underlying purpose, combined with ruthless flexibility and method, that's the defining characteristic of Pakistan's foreign policy as depicted here.
So the final takeaway, pulling together all these threads from the sources, seems to be Pakistan thrives when its army builds bridges. That's the phrase used.
Yeah, whether those bridges were built with American patent tanks,
Or Stinger missile supply lines funneled through the ISI.
or now the secure digital pathways of CPEC and blockchain connecting Beijing, Riyadh, Gwadar, and beyond.
It's a really powerful narrative of adaptable, often ruthless strategic planning in one of the world's toughest neighborhoods.
It is. And this whole history, this rapid dynamic evolution we've traced, it leads to a really important and I think quite provocative final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Given this long history of using shifting, sometimes contradictory alliances purely for survival and strength, how will Pakistan manage the inherent tensions in its current set of diverse partnerships?
You mean balancing China, the Gulf, the West?
Exactly. You've got immense infrastructure dependence on China through CPEC, massive vital capital investment coming from the Gulf states. But Pakistan still needs to operate within and remain interoperable with Western-dominated financial systems, technological standards, global trade rules.
That sounds like walking a very fine line.
It's a strategic tightrope walk. How do you successfully balance these potentially competing interests, these different economic models, different technological ecosystems, different geopolitical alignments? How do you ensure that this diversification genuinely amplifies Pakistan's strength and doesn't just dilute it or pull the country in too many contradictory directions?
Making sure the bridges don't end up leading to conflicting destinations.
Precisely. Successfully navigating that complex balancing act. That will likely define the next chapter of Pakistan's quest for survival and strength.